In business, trust is everything, especially for small business owners. Trust can be one of your biggest competitive advantages over larger, often faceless corporations. That's why it's so important for small businesses to intentionally build and strengthen trust with their customers. But how exactly do you do that? Well, for the last 11 years, Proof Strategies has been measuring trust levels in Canada's institutions and sharing their findings in their annual CanTrust Index, all with the goal of helping organizations understand, strengthen, and sustain trust and reputation. So who better to talk about building trust than Proof Strategies' own founder and chair, Bruce MacLellan. Bruce, thank you once again for joining us on Just Good Business.
Thank you, Al. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate your interest in trust.
Well, I am very interested in trust. Now, we had you on last year to discuss the index, so it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, has changed. But before we dive into those latest results, what can you tell us about Proof Strategies?
Proof Strategies is a management-owned, Canadian-owned communications strategy firm. We work with clients of all different sizes and types of activity to help them better connect with their audiences. Private sector organizations, public sector, not-for-profit charities. What we do is help our clients to build their connections with audiences and ultimately build trust.
Okay. Now, this is the 11th year of the CanTrust Index. Why did Proof create the index?
Well, trust is interesting, Al, because everybody would agree it's important. And, certainly there's nobody out there that says, I don't want trust. But on the other hand, nobody really treats it as a science or as a deliberate act that they can pursue and build. So we saw a gap in the Canadian market for a study of trust in Canada that could be used as a benchmark, and other organizations could look at the benchmark of our study and then start to do their own research and compare their own levels of trust. It's important to do local studies because trust is driven by local values, by local customs, by regional differences within a country like Canada, as well as by history and events. So this year, for example, we're seeing how the tensions with our southern border nation are influencing trust in Canada.
Right. Now, the 2026 index shows trust is rising for small and mid-sized businesses, as I kind of alluded to in my intro, while trust in larger corporations continues to lag. Why do you think small businesses are performing big companies on trust, and how can owners intentionally protect and build that advantage?
Well, I think there's a few factors at play in how the trust score is changing. And you're right, as you mentioned, that small and medium-sized enterprises have seen an increase in trust, while large corporations have seen a decrease. So within that context, think about the context where Canada is in a situation where our U.S. neighbor is attacking us. The president is openly critical of Canada, threatening annexation. And many large corporations are hesitant to stand up to the White House and are modifying their own behavior to be more in line with the White House. So Canadians are seeing that and thinking, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not sure I like that.
Yeah.
What I do see that I like is Canadian companies who are standing true to our values as a country and standing up for Canadian sovereignty. We're in a Canadian moment now in trust in Canada, and what we've seen is across a variety of questions in our survey, an increase in trust in all things Canadian. Now, we can never take that for granted, but everything from Canadian ownership of companies to trust in Canadian elections to trust in our key institutions such as the RCMP or the Canadian military, all of those sectors have seen an increase in trust during the past year.
Now, your findings suggest that Canadians increasingly expect businesses to act responsibly, economically, socially, ethically, like you just mentioned. For small business owners with limited resources, though, what kind of trust-building actions can actually matter most to their customers?
Well, I think resources are limited, and I'm the founder of a company that was a small business. Perhaps we could call it now a medium-sized enterprise. But I would say be thoughtful about what you do and who you're trying to connect with. And you certainly want to engage with your employees on a trust-building strategy. We always say that trust is built from the inside out. You want to have high trust with your own employees as a starting point, and they will ultimately become ambassadors for you to help build trust externally with your customers and other audiences. I think in terms of building profile in the community for a small business owner, look to what makes sense, what looks authentic and is genuine. Canadians are always telling us that values are an important part of what drives trust. People want to do business with companies where they see an alignment of values, and that will include showing support for your local community. So a company in the food business might want to do something to support a local food bank. A company that has a lot of female customers may want to do a partnership in something that helps with a women's shelter, perhaps. Or if you're in the landscaping business, maybe you want to partner with a local parks or environmental organization and show how you can be supporting them. This way, you're aligning with your values with a community cause, but you're also doing it in a credible way where it's clearly an area that you understand and know about.
Right.
Usually, we also would recommend that you talk to your customers. Ask them what's important. Ask them what would make them more trusting of you. There's lots of ways you can solicit customer feedback, and that will also help to map out your plan for trust.
Now, the big news item in the last couple of years has been AI, and I believe last year was the first year you guys included a question about AI in the index, if I'm not mistaken. And last year you had mentioned Canadians are using AI more, but trusting it less, which is kind of, it's a dichotomy there, right? So how should small business owners think about adopting AI tools for their business, without eroding that trust?
Well, AI has certainly become one of the more complicating factors around trust for any organization. And that's why we encourage caution and we encourage transparency. I think it's inevitable that AI is going to change how most of us work and live in so many ways that we can't even imagine now. I'm not saying we could resist it or should resist it. In fact, at our company, we're embracing AI, but we're doing it with a set of guidelines. Right. We've established a policy and what we call guardrails for our employees so that they can follow those guardrails and participate in using AI and learning about it, but doing it in a way that's where we've set some guidelines around our values and our ethics. One of which, as I've mentioned, is transparency. The interesting thing from our trust research that we're finding is that AI is perhaps the first major technological advance where familiarity is breeding contempt.
Right.
Which is a very ironic development, but it is such an unusual advance and a tool where really no one knows fully where it's going to take us and what it will do to our society. So there is this healthy skepticism of people around AI, and I say healthy because AI right now is something that we need to be skeptical of. It's an amazing tool, but it can also produce errors, and they call them hallucinations, where the AI tool will tell you something that's just blatantly untrue. Really, defining your values, setting your guardrails, and being transparent about how you use it is I think the key approach to take. The other thing is to always remind your employees and your customers that there are certain things that AI will never do, and particularly around judgment. Humans will always have judgment. And, when you think about the most consequential decisions in business, they're not about doing something faster or doing something in a more automated manner. They're about making good judgment decisions. And that is a uniquely human skill and characteristic. And AI is not ever going to replace humans for judgment. What we tell our employees is use AI as a co-pilot and use it to be more efficient or consider more points of view, but it's the human that has to make the final choice.
Yeah, good point. And you shouldn't be leaving those decisions to formulas for sure. Trust and test, right? I think is probably the important thing.
Trust and verify.
Verify, that's the word. Yes, trust and verify. Thank you for that. Now, trust in traditional institutions and experts remains relatively strong in Canada, but misinformation, another topic we talked a lot about last year, it continues to influence public opinion. What role can small business owners play as trusted voices in their communities?
Well, we know that small and medium-sized businesses are more trusted than large corporations. We also know that small business owners are more trusted than politicians. So, there's room for a voice for entrepreneurs and small business owners in their community. However, we also recommend the point that talk about the things you know about and don't find yourself talking about areas that are outside your expertise. That's unlikely to serve you well. The public tells us still, in terms of sources of information, that across every age group, all segments of our society, people still trust traditional news media, newspapers, radio stations, TV. Now, the traditional media has suffered in the last few years because of the changes to the economic model, but they are still trusted sources for people. So in some ways, a small business would want to align themselves with traditional media. So if there's an opportunity with a local newspaper, local radio, local television, working with the local news media allows you to take their trust halo and extend it into your brand or business, whatever you're doing. And you can tell a story that they find interesting and that also helps you with your customer and target customers. Entrepreneurs in general are trusted by about a third of Canadians across the country, a little more in some regions, a little less in others. So there's good trust for entrepreneurs, but certainly you should be looking to align yourself with other sources of information that the public might find even more trustworthy.
Now, ultimately, trust affects buying decisions, loyalty, word of mouth. Based on the index, what are some practical steps you can encourage like a small business owner to take to drive their growth through trust?
Well, there's a couple of things I would suggest for how a small business owner might start a trust strategy for their business. Certainly, trust is built from the inside out. So Canadians want to see businesses that treat their employees well, that pay them fairly, that provide good workplaces and good benefits for those employees. So build a loyal cadre of trust supporters, firstly among your own employees, and let them be good ambassadors for you as a trustworthy employer and a trusted business. Then your customer network would probably be your second priority. Our research tells us that one of the most trusted sources of information is people's friends and family. So people are talking to their friends and family about, where do you buy this? Who do you trust for that? And therefore, if you can build up a loyal and vocal following among your own customers, then you're going to be tapping into one of the most trusted channels in society, which is friends and family. So, I bought a car 2 years ago from a dealership, and 2 years later, my daughter's looking to buy a car. I recommended that dealership. I recommended the exact salesman because of how they treated me. They earned my trust. He was exceedingly service-oriented. He earned my trust. And as a result, they got a referral. Now, I actually don't think they did that much to build up my referral loyalty, but I did it anyway. So a business that has a more deliberate approach to building up referrals, actually encouraging happy customers to make referrals, to tell their friends and family about your business, that's an incredibly powerful way to leverage trust to build your revenue.
That's a great point, especially when it comes to large purchases like that. You're always asking other people for their experiences. And I feel like the bigger the purchase, the more important that trust would be.
We know that online reviews have a role, but they are nowhere as trusted as talking to your friends or your family members.
Right, because they can be gained, right? And I feel like at least human-to-human referral has a lot more weight.
What we've seen work well is some sort of customer reward. If you refer somebody to us who ends up becoming a customer, we'll do something for you. But I would encourage business owners to make it a reward that's proportionate to the value that they're providing.
Right.
So, if I recommend somebody buy a car and they end up spending $60,000, don't give me a $5 coffee coupon.
Right. Good. Yeah, make it proportional. Very, very good. Can you cherry pick one or two maybe surprising trends between last year to this year that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I would say one of the trends that jumped out at us in 2026 compared to the year before was the surge in trust around things Canadian. So many small and medium-sized businesses are going to be Canadian owned. Now is the time to put a maple leaf on your front door. Now is the time to remind your customers that you are Canadian owned. If you are a made in Canada business, shout it from the rooftop and let your customers know, because when we ask people what are the drivers of trust in companies in Canada, almost 70% of Canadians say that Canadian owned or made in Canada will improve their chances of trust in that company.
Amazing. I love that statistic. And you're right. Like I in the last year or so, because of things that have been going on, I have been looking more towards buying Canadian or giving a Canadian business my business. So a very good point. Now, if folks wanted to learn more about the CanTrust Index or Proof strategies, where would you send them?
So the entire research study is available for free and can be downloaded at cantrustindex.ca. That's our website, cantrustindex.ca. And we make the entire report available for free with the encouragement that people study it and look at how it applies to their specific sector, and then consider building a trust strategy for themselves. Trust is something that we all take as important, but we shouldn't treat it as an accident. We should treat it as a deliberate goal that we pursue. And it can be pursued. Trust can be a strategy. And if you achieve trust with your customers, you're going to have such a stronger business. It's well worth the investment.
That's the CanTrust Index from Proof Strategies. And Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. I hope to have you back next year around this time. Maybe we can talk more about the trust strategy, because I feel like that's something that might be a good actionable item for small business owners.
Thank you very much, Al. I look forward to talking again.
Okay, thank you.